Thanks for joining me today. This is Danny, and welcome to my brand new greenhouse. Today we are going to talk about the Botania mod, and we're going to kind of walk through the getting started tutorial. So one of the first things that you're going to want to do when you are getting into Botania is to grab this Lexica Botania that I have in my hand. It is a book with all the information that you could ever possibly want regarding the Botania mod and all of the cool things that it offers. This book can be found in dungeons, dungeon loot, or any type of dungeon chests, and it can also be crafted, and it's actually quite inexpensive to craft. It is just a book and a sapling. One of the things that this book has, besides having kind of a reference to all of the information that you're going to need, it also has what's called a tutorial mode. Under the basics, you click a tutorial of the basics, and what's going to happen is a bunch of red arrows are going to show up and kind of guide you through the book to show you all of the things that you need to know in a order that kind of makes sense in a tutorial style. So what we're going to actually be doing today is we're going to be covering all the stuff that tutorial covers in this video. So you can spend a couple hours reading through that tutorial and you'll learn a lot, or you can just watch this video and watch me demonstrate it, and I'll actually also add a few other tips and things that I've learned along the way. So alright, so let's get started. Actually, the first thing, before we even start talking about how to do stuff, it might be a good idea to think about why. Why do we want to get into why do we want to get into Botania? Now, for me personally, I'm a tech guy. I really like tech mods, and I do not usually get into magic mods at all. I just don't find them as interesting in tech mods, and I find it kind of weird. I mean, and part of that's just my personality. You know, in real life, I'm a science guy. I'm a computer programmer. But this particular mod I really like because it offers a lot of things that other mods don't offer, and without a lot of the busy work that some of the magical mods have. But there's a lot of very unique items. We have a lot of different functional flowers that do things like damage mobs nearby or grow crops quickly. You know, there's a certain flower that you can set up in your garden that'll basically work like constant bone meal. There's flowers that scare creepers. There's flowers that control Enderman teleporting, that like force Enderman. I mean, there's so many different things that are really unique to this mod that you're not going to find in anywhere else. And then there's also a bunch of bauble trinkets too. Oops. Amulets and rings and charms and things like that, and belts. There's a Sojourner Sash, which is a really great early game belt that basically gives you a speed boost, a higher jump height, a speed assist, or step assist rather, so that when you walk up something you don't have to jump to get up. Actually, I have dark armor that does that for me right now, but dark armor is, you know, kind of a later game thing. So this is something that you can do really early in the game. There's a Ring of Correction, which is pretty cool, which switches your tool in your hand based on what you are doing. So if you have a pickaxe in your hand and you're trying to dig dirt, it's actually going to switch your tool to a pickaxe as long as you're using Botania tools. And let's see what else. There's a ring that gives you haste. There's a Hand of Ender, it's called, that opens a vanilla ender chest. You can even open someone else's ender chest with it. So those are a few of the things that we can get out of Botania, and now I'm going to kind of show you how we can do a lot of that stuff, and toward the end we'll craft some of those cool things and demonstrate. So the first thing that you'll notice when you have Botania installed, of course, is that you have these mystical flowers that are all around the world. You find these all over the place, some tall ones, some little ones, and these are essentially flowers that have petals that you can use in crafting recipes. And there's 16 different colors. Here is a flower pouch, and this guy allows you to hold a full stack of all of each of the 16 colors. So when you're running around in the world gathering flowers, it's a really good idea to bring this pouch with you, otherwise those flowers are pretty much going to fill up your inventory pretty quickly because there's 16 different types. And it's a good idea to have a little bit of all. We also have this floral fertilizer. Floral fertilizer, if you run out of these flowers, or if you don't have any around, if for whatever reason you can't find them around, which I'd find hard to believe, but if for some reason you need to generate some more of these flowers, you can make this stuff, which basically works just like bone meal, except that it only produces these mystical flowers in a crafting grid, and you get these petals, which are used in several crafting recipes. You can also make dyes out of them, or powders, by mixing them with a pestle and mortar, and that gives you floral powder, which basically is a dye. But mostly the main purpose of these, pretty sunset, the main purpose of these is for use within the petal apothecary. Oh, I should also mention that you also have these tall mystical flowers, which you cannot, which you will need a shears in order to collect them. And these will actually give you 4 petals, whereas these only give you 2. And you can actually turn these into tall by applying bone meal, and then it turns it into a tall mystical flowers. This is actually a pretty cheap crafting recipe. Just a couple of cobblestone slabs, some cobblestone, and any mystical petal. So it could be white, could be whatever color, it doesn't matter. You're going to get the same thing, this petal apothecary. This is essentially one of the crafting mechanics in Botania. And the way it works is you just throw seeds, or you throw petals in there, depending on the recipe, and then you throw a seed in there. And you can throw any kind of seed in there. It doesn't really matter. And since I have a whole bunch of these potato seeds, I'll just grab some potato seeds. Or you can just use vanilla seeds, whatever. It doesn't matter. Any kind of seed to complete the crafting process. The first thing that we're going to want to craft when we're working with Botania in here is a pure daisy. So a pure daisy, if we look in our Lexica Botania, we can actually go to the index and just start typing pure daisy. And you can do that on any of the pages. Just start typing and it'll search. This is our most basic flower, and it's going to produce living wood and living rock. And this is how we craft it. We just throw 4 white petals in here, so I can just do that, and you can see they're kind of floating around in there. And then we throw a seed in there to complete the process. So we can just go here and do Q, and then we get that fun little graphic, and then we get our pure daisy. So the pure daisy we can just plant it, stick it down on the ground, and surround it with wood or stone. We surround it with wood to get living wood. We surround it with stone. That would be like, you know, the smooth stone. Vanilla, if I can find some. To get living wood and living stone. And we can put up to 8 blocks, and we don't have, and you can see there's a particle effect here that shows that it's being converted. We can put up to 8 blocks around it. We could surround this entirely with living wood, or we could surround it entirely with living stone, or we can mix and match, so or whatever. Our pure daisy has completed the process of converting our stuff. A few other things that the pure daisy can do, which you might find useful. You can also put netherrack and turn it into cobble. You can turn soul sand into sand through the same process. And you can turn ice to packed ice, and you can turn water into snow, you can turn water into snow. Alright, now it's time to make our main tool, and that is the Wand of the Forest. And that is made with these living wood twigs. So we're gonna need, actually we're gonna need 3 of them, so we're gonna have to harvest ourselves a little bit more living wood. I'm just gonna grab all this and replant it, so to speak. We need 3 of these living wood twigs in a pattern like that, and then we need 2 petals. And whatever color petals that we use, so if we use white petals for instance, we're going to have a wand of the forest with white petals. I'm actually going to do blue and green. Sure, why not? So this is going to be one of our main tools that we're going to use in to do this all mod. Those things that we talked about in the beginning. The flowers that do the cool things and the baubles things and all that, they all need a source of energy called mana. It's basically like redstone flux in a technical mod pack, or a technical mod, except it is specific to Botania, and it's kind of a magical energy. Mana spreader transports mana from one place to another. If you hold your wand of the forest, you'll be able to see the direction that it's transporting mana in. And if we actually move this, we can use our wand of the forest in function mode to basically rotate this thing on the axis by shift right clicking. Okay, I think it's pointing down now. But there's a much better way to do this, and I'll show you that in a minute. We grab our wand of the forest. We see this little nifty graphic here. What that's telling us is that this is the point, this is basically the maximum distance that we can send mana optimally. Once we get beyond this point, we start to lose mana, and you can kind of see that the beam gets smaller as we move on. So if we want to transport mana further than this, we're either going to need we're going to need more mana spreaders, or some other way of at this point or before intercepting the mana to move it. When we're looking at it with the wand in our hand, we can see that it says unknown status. If we right click on it, we're going to see a progress bar that basically shows us how much mana is in this buffer. And right now we have none, because we haven't started generating any mana yet. And that progress bar, and you're going to see this with a lot of the Botania items that have mana buffers, and they will only update when you right click them. Mana pools. So there's one type of mana pool that you can craft, and it's called a diluted mana pool. And you're going to want to make 2 of these, and you'll find out why in a second. The diluted mana pool holds a very small amount of mana, and there's really only one thing we can do with it, because it doesn't hold enough mana to really do anything interesting other than making ourselves a mana pool. So if we look in NEI, and under mana pool, we'll see that there are there's a minecart with a mana pool. There's a diluted mana pool with the recipe that we just did, and there is a mana pool, and the only way to get it is by dropping a diluted mana pool into a mana pool to get a mana pool. So, and then there's also the creative one, the everlasting guilty pool, which is only available in creative mode. So you're going to have to craft 2 of these mana pools so that you can use the one in order to upgrade the other, and that's the only thing you can do with that mana pool. So again, just like the mana spreader, when we hold our wand of the forest, we can see by right clicking that there's no mana in here. And by the way, if we shift right click, you can see we change the mode from sparing mana to items to accepting mana from items, and we'll see a little bit more about that later. And then of course we can see our beam, and I happen to place the mana pool in that beam. I mean the mana pool in the beam of the spreader. Now what we can also do, if we were to put our mana pool, say, over there, we can then use our wand of the forest in bind mode. So we shift right click in the air, and it's now bind mode. See, it toggles function bind. We can then shift right click on this, and you can see it's selected, and then shift right click on this to change, to basically bind this to that. So it is now shooting mana directly into the diluted mana pool, even though it's not And you can do that in any direction, so it'll go up, it'll go down, whatever. So it's pretty nice, and you can see that it actually turns to face whatever it is that it's bound to. And you can do that with everything. You can even do that with the flowers, which we're going to get into in a second. So essentially, this is our second crafting mechanic. So our first crafting mechanic was the petal apothecary. We drop petals in there and we get stuff. And here we're going to drop all kinds of stuff to get mana infused equivalent of that item. So now we can't really do anything until we actually start generating mana. And we're going to need some mana generating flowers to do that. The most basic mana generating flower, and actually if we go into our Lexica Botania, there's a whole section on generating flora. So these are all flowers that generate mana in several different ways. The most basic is the daybloom. So the daybloom works during the day. It basically uses photosynthesis from the sun. And why is it frickin' raining again? Stop raining! And it requires 2 yellow petals, 1 orange, and 1 light petal apothecary. We're going to throw 2 yellow petals, 1, 2, 1 blue, whoops, and 1 orange. And then we can throw a seed in there. Now if we do this quickly within 20 seconds, wait, let's put all of our seeds there. Fill it up again with a bucket, and then we shift click with a empty hand, and it automatically pulls those petals out of our inventory and repeats the recipe. Alright, now we'll grab our bucket. Fill it up with water. This, by the way, is Pam's Harvest Craft water barrel, which basically acts like an infinite water source, but it only requires one block. Okay, there we go. Do that again. Get ourselves 5 dayblooms. Now dayblooms, like I said, they generate mana, but only during the day. Now if we place a bunch of these like this, we see this little particle effect. What that's telling us is that these guys are conflicting with each other. When you set these next to each other, you get diminishing returns. So we do not want to do that. We want to alternate them. So that, for instance, you could have like a checkerboard pattern. What the heck? Like that. So now if we grab our wand to the forest, we can see 2 things when we look at these. One, we can see their buffer, which is not going to have anything in it right now because it's not during the day, so they're not generating mana. And then it's going to be bound to the mana spreader. So you need a mana spreader in order to accept mana from the flowers. You cannot send mana directly from a flower into a mana pool. You can also bind these. So let's say you've got a couple of different mana spreaders set up. You can bind it to a particular mana spreader by putting your wand in bind mode, and then shift right clicking, and then shift right clicking again, and then you get that little graphic that tells you what it's bound to. But since it's nighttime, these guys are not going to generate mana. So so there's another flower that generates mana during the night, and that is called the nightshade. It's basically just like the daybloom, except it does the same thing at nighttime instead of during the day. So we need 2 black petals, a gray, and a purple petal. And what we can do is, they have the same situation where you cannot put them next to each other, but you can put them next to dayblooms. So what we can do is set them up kind of in between the dayblooms to use our space efficiently. So why don't we just make 3 of them and kind of fill in those. Now we've got ourselves 3 nightshades. So now we're finally actually going to start generating some mana. Okay, any minute now we should be getting our first burst. There it is, our first burst of mana. So our mana spreader builds up a certain amount of mana, and then it does a burst into our diluted mana pool. So now we may be able to take our diluted mana pool and turn it into a regular one, but we can't. Because we don't have quite enough mana. That's what that little X is telling us. It's showing us what we can craft, but then the X tells us that there's not enough mana in there. Because we only have three of these nightshades and they do not produce very much mana, it's going to take a little while before we have enough mana. In fact, if we right click again, we can see that tiny little blue dot on the left of the progress bar that's showing us how little mana we have in this thing. So we're going to need some flowers that generate a lot more mana. So one of the next tier mana producing flowers that we can make is the Endoflame. And that's the next one on the list. And the Endoflame is going to produce a lot more mana than these guys that we have, the Dayblooms and the Nightshades. In fact, one Endoflame is probably going to produce more mana than all of these guys put together. And basically what the Endoflame does is it consumes, but it does require mana petals. So we're not going to be able to make it yet until we get our mana pool. But you can drop a piece of coal by it, or anything that would burn in a furnace, and it'll produce mana for it. We now have a check mark, which means that we can now craft this. So we just crafted ourselves a mana pool. So we can get rid of this diluted mana pool and set down our mana pool. And then once there's enough mana in here, we can create this, or turn that one into a regular mana pool as well. One thing I did mention before, when you hover over with the wand of the forest, you can see that the mana spreader gets highlighted. And that's telling you that this flower is sending mana to that particular thing. And if we highlight this, we can see that that one's highlighted. Or when we hover over this, we see that one's highlighted. Alright, we can now make our red mana petal. We just throw that in there and we get it back as a mana petal. So we can make ourselves one of these guys. So we need... I keep turning the rain off and... Ugh. I have this weather controller from Draconic Evolution, which was quite expensive. I have it set to turn the rain off when it gets a redstone signal. I wonder if the fact that it's blocked by that has any bearing. But it's turning the rain off. But then like a few minutes later it starts raining again. Well, whatever, who cares. We're sheltered here in the greenhouse. And by the way, if you get the recipe wrong, when you throw your seeds in it, it's going to drop. So we did something wrong here. So what we can do is get an empty hand and then just shift right click. Okay, that's a gray petal. We need a light gray. So there's a demonstration of what happens when you do something wrong and how to correct it over here for now. And so this guy is not producing any mana right now. But what we can do is we can grab some coal. In fact, oh, we've got tons of coal. Okay. So we can give it coal, we can give it blocks of coal, we can give it wood, whatever. Anything that you can put in a furnace. And we'll see that it will consume it. And now it's producing mana. So we should be getting mana a little more quickly in here now. It's still barely doing anything, but and then to automate this, it consumes a piece of charcoal or coal about once every 72 seconds. So you could have a like a dropper or a open crate, which is actually a Botania item, which works similar to a dropper, that it will drop items straight down. So it's a little bit more precise than a dropper. And what you could do is set up a redstone timer or something that drops one every 72 seconds. That's the Endoflame. There are many other ways of generating mana, many other flowers, some of them that use like explosions, some of them use water. The Hydrangeus you can set up next to water and it'll drink the water. It's actually a little creepy because you actually hear it drinking. There's one that actually eats food. There's one that consumes slimes, so if you are in a biome or an area where slimes would spawn, it will, whenever the slime would otherwise spawn, it will just consume it and produce mana from it. So this shows you the Hydrangeus. You set it up next to an infinite water supply, not above it. It actually has to be at the same level as the water. Okay, so our day blooms are spent. They just disappeared. They only last for so long. It's a good way to just kind of get things started. Alright, I've got some basic automation set up here. It's a little bit ugly, but I'm basically just using Steve's inventory manager with an item valve and a redstone emitter and a item dropper from OpenBlocks. You could also use the crate from Botania, but then you'd also need some kind of inventory. But basically what this thing is doing is it's checking the inventory of the item valve to see if there's a piece of coal, and if there is one, it shuts off the redstone signal. If there isn't one, like right now, it emits a redstone pulse. So that is pretty cool. I think I'll probably set up a few of these and just kind of have a line of them. It's not the prettiest setup. The Steve's Factory Manager blocks are, I mean, they don't really fit the Botania greenhouse look, but the Runic altar. This guy will allow us to craft runes, which will be used in crafting recipes that are actually more interesting. So we can either use a mana pearl or a mana diamond and some living rock. And to make the mana pearl or mana diamond, let's see, what do I have more of? I have I definitely have more ender pearls. So we just drop a ender pearl in our mana tank, or mana pool, same thing, and we get a mana pearl. And we have enough living rock. So something, is that how it went? Yeah, there's our Runic altar. Is another crafting mechanic. It's similar to the others, the Petal Apothecary and the Mana Pool, in that you toss stuff onto it or right click in order to create runes. Similarly, you can right click with an empty hand to remove the last item, or shift right click to remove the last item, and you can also right click with an empty hand to repeat the last recipe. So there's 3, or I guess technically 4 different types of runes. There are the basic runes, and those are the 4 elements. Let's see, are they in that order here? Yeah, water, fire, earth, and air. These are the easiest to craft. They basically require mana steel, which is iron dropped in a mana pool, a fishing rod, sugar cane, and some bone meal. And we could take a look at these other ones too, and they're all relatively inexpensive. The second tier is the intermediate, which uses the 4 seasons. So we've got spring, and basically these are going to use the first tier. So these are going to use the 4 elements in them. So it's kind of a second tier, and then some other ingredients which aren't terribly expensive. So we've got the spring, summer, autumn, and winter. And then the third tier, which is kind of the highest tier, is the 7 deadly sins. So these are recipes that are going to be a little more expensive, and they're going to, each of them uses a basic and an intermediate. So they're each going to use one of the 4 seasons and one of the 4 elements. So we have gluttony, greed, wrath, envy, pride, And then we have the Rune of Mana, which is kind of in its own category. And that's just a bunch of mana steel and a mana pearl. So we're going to see these things showing up, and then it also shows you how much mana it's going to use. Alright, so let's say for instance we want to make ourselves a Sojourner Sash. As I mentioned earlier, this is a belt that you wear in your Baubles belt slot. It gives you a speed boost, it also gives you a jump boost, and it allows you to step up. So here we need 4 leather, we need a Rune of Earth, and a Rune of Air. So this one is pretty cheap, it actually only uses the first tier runes. So first of all we'll make a Rune of Earth. So we need 3 mana steel, a stone, a block of coal, and a mushroom. So first of all we grab our 3 iron. Let's see, let's just grab a bunch of iron because we're going to be doing a lot more of this. In fact, we're going to need 3 for this recipe, and we're going to need 3 for this one. So we can do 6. Okay, and I really don't know how much mana that uses. So, and then we're going to throw 3 of them on here. So we can either just right click and it'll start floating around, or we can just throw it in with a Q, with the Q key. Right clicking is probably more precise and a little easier. And let's see, what was the other thing we needed? Which one are we doing? We'll do the Rune of Earth first. So that's the stone, block of coal, and mushroom. So we have to link a mana spreader to the runic altar, and we can see kind of a progress bar there, well, a circle. It's filling up, it's showing us the progress. When it fills up that circle, we're going to start seeing some lightning graphics. Okay, and at that point we can throw a living rock. We can throw a living rock on there and right click with our wand, and there we have our first runes of Earth. So we right click with the wand of the forest, and then we see that little icon, and then we have to find our mana spreader, and now we're going to start seeing progress. Alright, we've got our lightning graphic over there, so we throw on a piece of living rock, and then right click with our wand of the forest, and there we have it, our runes of Earth. So now we have runes of Earth and runes of Air, so we can make this guy in a crafting table. And there we have it, our Sojourner Sash. So if we actually, let me take off my dark armor, pants and boots, and I'll take the jetpack off too. So we can kind of see this is my normal walking speed, my normal jumping, and if I want to go up here I have to jump. That kind of sucks, right? So we put our Sojourner Sash on. Oh, I already had a belt on, but oh, actually that's not in the belt slot. Okay, so we're still walking normally. We still have normal jump. Why? Because we need mana. The Sojourner Sash uses a small amount of mana in order to give you the step assist and the jump boost. So that brings us to our next item on our list. The mana tablet allows you to carry mana with you, and it powers your mana items with mana. So this is how we craft it. Alright, so there's our mana tablet. Oh boy, and I am out of inventory space again. Alright, so what we do with our mana tablet, first of all we have to make sure that our mana pool is sparing mana to items. By default, it's set to accepting mana from items. So that would mean that if you drop a mana tablet, well here I'll show you. So we change it to sparing mana to items. So now we can drop our mana tablet in there, and it's gonna, and then back off so that we don't end up picking it up again. And it's gonna start sucking mana out of the mana pool into the mana tablet. And we actually emptied the mana pool, And one of the things you can do with this is you can go to another mana pool, and that's set to accepting mana from items, and it will actually move the mana into that pool. So that's one way to actually move mana from one place to another manually. But now, okay, so now we have a small amount of mana in here. So now our Sojourner Sash is going to make us run a little faster. It gives us a step assist so that we don't have to jump when we're going up 1 block, and we have a bit of a jump boost. Whee! Alright, we just crafted our first functional item. Just a couple things about the mana tablet. The mana tablet does not despawn. So you can leave it in here, and it'll just suck up mana until it's full. Alright, I've increased our mana production a little bit, and we are now going to talk about... I actually had to do 2 mana spreaders because the one wasn't keeping up. So now we've got a decent production of mana steel, or of mana, so we can start making some mana steel. Now mana steel... oh, whoa, what did I just do? Oh, I just dropped it. Okay, I did exactly what I wanted to do. And it used some mana. We now have 25 ingots of mana steel. Now mana steel can be used in many of the same ways that iron can be used. And it's kind of one of the first tiers of materials. We have mana steel, and then we can make mana steel armor. We can make mana steel tools, pickaxe, shovel, shears, and then the next tier is terra steel. So anyway, these work similar to regular metals, where we can craft like a pickaxe, for instance, using living wood twigs. And mana steel. That will get us a mana steel pickaxe, which is similar to an iron pickaxe, except that instead of, if you have mana available on you in a mana tablet, it will use mana instead of durability. So theoretically these tools could last forever. And the same with the armor. And they also have special right click abilities. So the mana steel pickaxe will place torches when you right click. So if you're strip mining, and it also has a nice graphic showing you how many torches you have left, so you don't have to take up torches in your hotbar. The shovel actually will till earth when you right click. The axe will place saplings. So that is it. That is all I'm going to cover about Botania today. I'm actually probably planning on doing some more advanced tutorials as I progress through the tiers in my Infinity world. And I'm also going to be, and of course I'm going to be doing I'm going to be trying to do as much automation here as I can, because I love automating things and I don't like having to go here and manually put flowers in it, and I don't like to have to manually drop stuff into my mana pool or the Runic altar. If you enjoyed the visit to the greenhouse today, and I hope you will join me again in the future as we progress through the Botania complexity and start making some really cool objects. Some of the late game stuff. Oh, check out my sash. You can see it hanging around my waist. And also the mana tablet. You can actually see it. It's like hanging out on my side, like on my belt clip or something. That is pretty cool. Alright, anyway. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you learned something from it. If you did, of course, please click the thumbs up button and subscribe if you want future tutorials and future Let's Plays or whatever. Thank you for watching, and I hope you will join me again. Bye-bye!